Hello, everybody. Welcome to the first day of Black Ink Charleston and our Writing for Harlequin panel. I'm so thrilled to be here, and I'm honored and humbled to be speaking with these four incredible women that you're about to meet. This is how we're going to do this today. This is going to be a very conversational panel, a bit of an interview between myself and the panelists. However, if you do have questions, feel free to drop them in the Q&A section. That's just to your right. There's a chat section and a Q&A section. You can use the chat to say hi, comment whatever you like, just like Rhonda McKnight did there. Hello, Rhonda. But if you do have a specific question, use the Q&A section to the right. We've got the wonderful Savannah from Black Ink who's monitoring all those questions. She'll do her best to moderate them, and we'll do our best to get to all of them. My name is Nicholas Arnold. I'm the Author Engagement and Communications Coordinator at Harlequin. Harlequin, of course, as a leading romance publisher, has 11 different series lines ranging from spicy to suspenseful to sweet to inspirational. And to learn all about these series, and especially the ones that you might want to one day write for, visit writeforharlequin.com. Write for Harlequin is about finding new voices in romantic fiction. Harlequin publishes over 60 new romance novels every month, and our experienced and friendly team of editors are always on the lookout for new talent. Well, one of the things that we love to do at Write for Harlequin is celebrate new authors. We do that through our newsletter every month with our I Got the Call stories in our blog. But today I am thrilled to be able to celebrate our authors, albeit virtually, but live and in person. And so without further ado, I'm going to introduce our panel. Michelle Lindell Rice has published a variety of books and has won multiple awards. Her debut novel, Sing a New Song, was a Black Expressions bestseller and Editor's Choice feature selection. She is the 2015 winner of the Black Writers and Book Club's Rock Female Author of the Year Award. That's quite the award title. And a recipient of the 2017 Black Pearls Legend and Leader Award. Her love-inspired debut with Harlequin, The Adoption Surprise, will be released on February 22nd. Welcome, Michelle.
Hi, everybody. Thank you.
Next up on our panel, we have the wonderful Reese Ryan. Reese is the author of 20 published works of romantic fiction and counting. Born and raised in the Midwest, she now resides in Central North Carolina. An advocate for the romance genre and diversity in fiction, she is the past president of her local Romance Writers of America chapter, a panelist at the 2017 Los Angeles Times Festival of Books, and the 2018 Donna Hill Breakout Author. She also has an excellent podcast, sort of streaming show hybrid on YouTube called Story Behind the Story. You can find that just by typing her name into YouTube, and that's where romance readers and authors connect. Welcome, Reese.
Thank you, Nicholas. I am so excited to be here in chat today.
Wonderful. Next up, we have Jacqueline Thomas. Jacqueline Thomas is published with Harlequin, Walkworthy Press, Simon & Schuster, and Penguin Books. She is published in the romance, women's fiction, inspirational, and young adult genres. Her first book, Hidden Blessings, was published in 1997 and actually adapted by BET into a made-for-television movie. Jacqueline writes for Harlequin Heartwarming, with her latest, Her Hometown Hero, being released in February as well. Her books have garnered several awards, and she was the first recipient to receive the Writers' Achievement Award at the North Carolina Book Festival in Winston-Salem. She also received a Lifetime Achievement Award from Romantic Times magazine, and in 2019, she published her 89th title. Welcome, Jacqueline.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here.
Well, it's an honor to have you. And last but not least, we've got Denise N Wheatley. Denise N Wheatley's first novel, I Wish I Never Met You, was published by Simon & Schuster in 2004. Since then, she has written and ghostwritten over 20 novels and novellas, including contemporary, suspense, paranormal, and steamy romances. She currently writes with Harlequin Intrigue, with her first novel for the series, Cold Case, True Crime, published in June of 2021. The follow-up, Bayou Christmas Disappearance, was published this past December, and upcoming 2022 releases include her West Coast crime drama series and A Deadly Christmas Scheme. So there's lots to look forward to from Denise. When Denise isn't writing, she enjoys blogging, watching true crime TV, and chatting with her many readers. Welcome, Denise.
Thank you, Nick. Hi, everybody. Thank you for having me.
All right. So as you can tell from the biographies of this wonderful panel, we have a lot to get through and just not enough time. So I'm going to dive right in. This is a question for everybody, but I'll start with Michelle, how about? And what I'd like to hear from everybody is if you could just walk me through that moment, that epiphany when you knew that you wanted to be a writer, and what was the first step that you took to actually making that happen? Michelle, we'll start with you.
Okay. The moment that I realized that I wanted to be a writer, it came by as a process for me. I'm an avid reader. I love reading. So I'm that person that went to the library and left with a stack of books every day and returned the next day with more. And I was going through a really difficult time in my relationship at that point. And I started just to turn to writing to give me an outlet, a release. And that's where the stories started to pour out. And it wasn't though until my passion, it became a passion of mine, that it began to align with what God wanted me to do, that it gave me some purpose with my writing.
And Michelle, I'm just wondering, was it always romance, or were you just writing fiction in general or nonfiction? Like, what was the first sort of incarnation of that?
Yeah, so my first work that I wrote, I would say it's a mix of a woman's fiction and romance, but definitely it was under the romance genre with urban Christian books.
Wonderful. That's fantastic. Denise, how about yourself? What was your moment where you realized this is what I want to do?
So my moment came my senior year of college. I had just written a 12-page story. So 12, 12 pages to me meant a novel. So I finished that story and I thought, and then I just read Terry McMillan. So I see this woman who looks like me, because I normally read the Jackie Collins, Danielle Steele. I see this woman who looks like me. I just wrote this 12-page story. So I'm like, I'm on my way. So little did I know it was a little different from writing a full novel. But after graduation, I just took a stab at it. I started writing and I figured if I can get 3 chapters done, maybe I can make this happen. So I just started writing the book. And then I bought a book called the Author's Toolkit about how to get published. So from writing the book to getting an agent to finding a publisher, I followed that process, and that's how it happened for me.
That's really interesting, because there is so much advice out there. Denise, did you actually find that by following that book more or less to a T, you were able to find that success for yourself?
Absolutely. It contained everything. Back then, it was a little different. There was no such thing as self-publishing. So I had to query, I had to find an agent, but the book helped me with the process, and it really did work.
That's fantastic.
That's how you came about.
That's fantastic. Jacqueline, maybe we'll move on to you there. What was your big moment where you decided I want to be a writer? If there was a big moment, maybe it was gradual for you.
Actually, I knew in 3rd grade I wanted to be a writer because my 3rd grade teacher, I had written a short story that she thought maybe had happened, and she was a bit concerned. So, but I told her it was what I saw in my head. But actually, that big moment for me, the epiphany, was at 16 when my boyfriend dumped me for my best friend. And I'm very introverted, very shy, not confrontational back then, a little more confrontational now. But I came home and I wrote a story where I killed him, chopped him into little pieces, and spread him all over New York. And so it felt good. So I realized writing at that point was very cathartic for me. Don't judge me, but it was that moment that I knew. I did not write my first book until I was 35. However, I was pregnant with my 3rd child, and I was on bed rest for 5 months. And so during that time, my mother-in-law brought me a book to read, and it was Beverly Jenkins' Night Song. And that was the first book I'd seen with people of color. So kind of for me, that was like when that light bulb went off that now is the time to do this.
Fantastic. We've Katie Richards in the comment there says a bestseller thrilling in the making, Jacqueline. So maybe you want to revisit that old draft. Reese, how about yourself? What was your moment?
I also always wrote as a kid. When I was I remember we were bused in junior high school, and I would be writing stories, and a friend found out I was writing, and like literally I'm writing and they're passing the pages around the bus as I'm writing. So I knew very young that I wanted to write, and it really, really became clear to me, I think, when I read Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. Like that whole experience, the emotional experience, I wanted to give that to other people. So that's kind of when I really knew that's what I wanted to do. But, life got in the way, and I didn't really start trying to seriously write again until like maybe my late 30s. And so I was published when I was first published, I think I was 43. So it took a while, but the thing as an adult that really helped me to start taking writing seriously again was participating in Nanowrimo. And then what helped me really start to move forward and take the steps necessary to become a writer was joining my local RWA chapter. So going there and hearing people's stories, hearing their celebrations of getting a deal or getting on a bestseller list, things like that was, really, really helpful to me, as well as the networking and meeting different people in the publishing industry.
That's an excellent segue, Reese, because, and so maybe I'll just stay on you here a little bit if you can elaborate with that. There's this moment, and I think there's a common thread between everybody of finding this a little bit later in life, whether it's your 30s or your 40s, or coming back to this passion. You hear that a lot with authors, but let's talk about that defining moment from, okay, I love writing. I realized as a kid that I like it, whether it's, you were dumped and it was a revenge plot, or you just enjoyed making up these stories. Let's talk about that moment where, no, I want to make this my career. What are the steps I'm going to take? So Reese, you mentioned joining your RWA chapter, and things like that. What were some other steps that you might have taken to actually turning this into a career for yourself?
So, first it was just with the NaNoWriMo, because I was doing copywriting for other people. And so one of the other copywriters I knew and worked with online had told me about NaNoWriMo. And so I started getting involved with that. So then I got all these different stories and stuff. And I actually joined a critique group locally. And I always call it me and a bunch of old dudes. But so we were in this group, and I'm writing this story because at the time I really heavily read chick lit. I'm waiting for it to make its full, come back. So I was reading a lot of that, and so I wrote the story. And the guys in the group were like, "Oh, so are you going to submit this to a romance, publisher?" And I'm like, "Why would I do that?" So like I didn't even really think of it as romance. It's just all the stories I had been reading up till then. They had a central romance in them, but whether they were considered romance or not. So that's really when I came awake to the whole idea of romance and started reading romance and stuff. So that's when I kind of discovered RWA. And so I looked at it for and visited for free, for a few years or whatever, before I finally was like, okay, I'm ready to make this investment and actually this becoming my career. And so then I took it super seriously. So there were workshops and stuff that we could be involved in there. I learned about different reference books and stuff, craft books that were available, started to read those and started to, apply some of the things. That's when things started to really move for me. And I actually kind of just immersed myself in the writing community. That helped as well, because it was, well, I don't want to get into one of your questions in case you're asking about that later, but that's what helped me, eventually find my first publisher, which was Carina Press, being a part of the online writing community.
Fantastic. Yeah, enough can't be said about being a part of the community of something you're passionate about. Denise, you touched on this a little bit, obviously, like reading the book, but was there any other sort of key steps you took to turning this into a professional career for yourself?
I was just laser focused from the beginning. I had a vision. I knew what I wanted to do. So I just stayed focused on that. Number one was getting the book written. I would never be able to make a career out of this unless I had an actual piece of work to pass on. So before I started doing too much research into agents and publishers and so forth, I wanted to just have a piece of work done and then make it as good as possible. So once I did that, I felt like, okay, I can really do this. I was so determined to see a book hit the shelf. That was my number one goal. So once I got that book written, I sent it out. And and again, we might address this later. So many rejections. So I just threw away my rejection letters last year that I collected over the years. There were almost 100. But I just kept going because I was so determined. I knew I would make it happen, and I did. So I think just being focused, having that goal, and not getting too far out in, too much research, too much outlining. Get your book written and get it out here. That's where it starts. So that's where it started for me.
And I assume with that, it wasn't necessarily you didn't write the next great American novel on your first try, it was okay to just get it out and have it be what it was, which can be a hard thing to get over, especially if you're a perfectionist,
Right.
Yeah.
And you'll get the feedback. You'll get the feedback from the agents and the editors. They'll tell you what's wrong. So then it's up to you to either, a lot of writers will shove that to the side and do something else because they can't really stomach it, or you just have to swallow it, make your work better, and keep going until you get there. And even once you're published, you might still go through those things. So it's really about sticking with it, being able to take the criticism and keep moving forward if that's what you really want to do, even if you really want this as a career.
Well said. Well said. Michelle, how about yourself? I know you talked about that sort of moment where you realized this is what you're going to do. What steps did you then take?
For me, not knowing anything about writing, I just wrote the book. I had no idea. I started off by writing the story, but then as the years went by, I began to attend writers' conferences. And because a lot of writers' conferences have panels like these where you learn a lot, but also you get a chance to work with maybe other authors, or they'll do workshops. And so that's where I learned things such as, editing your work or pitching your work, developing taglines for your work, all of that. So that's kind of where I started. Was I literally just wrote my story first, not knowing anything about writing, but definitely as I went through the editing process and by working with other authors as well, I learned a lot about writing that way as well.
Wonderful. And Jacqueline, yourself?
Well, with me, I felt like I had something to prove. I had 5 degrees, college degrees that, and I wanted to prove that I could be just as good a writer as I was a student. So for me, it was about proving to my husband, who, supported me while I was in school, to my parents who spent money for me to go to college and get these degrees. And, with 2 masters, they're like, what are you doing wanting to be a writer? Get a real job. And so I was sick of corporate America. But from day one, I'm hyper-focused. I bought research books. That's what I wanted when I decided to become a writer. My son was born in January. So for Christmas, I wanted money to buy research books on the craft of writing. And so I spent, my husband gave me the money and I bought, I think it was like 25 writing books, to study the craft. After I had my baby, I went to RWA to their conference and I met Donna Hill, Beverly Jenkins, Francis Ray, who later became mentors to me. And so I credit them for, Donna Hill actually made the appointment with her editor, who was Monica Harris at the time, because I was afraid to pitch. I didn't know how to pitch. So Donna Hill went and made the appointment and then worked with me, her and Francis Ray, that evening, having just met me, worked with me on my pitch. And the next day I flubbed the pitch, but she still asked to see the manuscript. And so I sold the book. It happened so fast for me. I was trying to keep up, but I didn't want to let anybody down. I'm a little bit of a perfectionist. I'm super organized. So for me, when I'm not writing, I am reading books on the craft of writing. I challenge myself. As you see, I write multi-genre. I learn one genre. I try to learn something, do something different. I want to constantly surprise the readers. So that's me in a nutshell. I'm constantly challenging myself to write the very best book that I can.
I like that a lot. And the other thing I would just ask is, beyond just reading actual books about the craft, when you read a novel, are you reading it analytically and kind of going, why does this work? Why is it not working for me? And sort of breaking down things a little bit?
Yes, that in movies. And that's I would say, kind of a con, because you don't get to just read for the pleasure of reading anymore or watching a movie. You start to analyze everything.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. That leaves me a little bit. I want to talk in a moment about what your actual process is when you do write, but let's talk about that moment that led you to Harlequin. So, Reese, I'll start with you, and what I want to know is, obviously you start deciding you want to write romance and everything like that. So Harlequin is a natural thing, but what attracted you to actually wanting to get a book published by Harlequin?
So, again, I'm one of the ones who is like newer to the whole romance genre and stuff. So at the time, like, I knew the name, but like I wasn't it wasn't like I had been reading my aunt or grandmother's Harlequin books since I was 12. So like it was just like not like I was saying, okay, hey, I want to write specifically for Harlequin, but I knew I wanted to be published and I had started to read more and more. And I was a part of it. It was an online organization, which doesn't even exist anymore, I don't think. But they would do pitches periodically. And so they had some pitches where you could, pitch to an editor or whatever. And I was I was accepted by one of those editors. But by that time, I had read enough books to know that, okay, like I kind of really want to write for one of Harlequin's lines. It was just because I had read different stories and stuff, and I liked what they were doing, and so that's what kind of made me reject that offer and kind of nudge Carina Press to see if they would be interested in the story that I had pitched them, and they were. So that's how I ended up. That's how I started my career with Harlequin, writing those two books for Carina Press. So like as I started to get immersed in the romance genre, then I was like, okay, Harlequin's a huge player, and they have all kinds of different lines. So it's a little bit of something for everyone. So it gives you quite a bit of room to decide, what you want to do. And you can move from one line to another, over the course of your career, as I have done. So that was some of the things that appealed to me about writing for Harlequin. The other thing I really like about them is where so many of the publishers, you have to have an agent to get in front of them. With Harlequin lines, you are able to pitch most of them, a lot of them, like category lines, without having an agent, which takes away that barrier. So that's a really nice thing about Harlequin as well.
Yeah, absolutely. You're taking notes right out of my closing there, Reese. Denise, how about yourself? What attracted you to Harlequin?
So for me, my mother was an avid reader. She had all of the romance books at home. So I would sneak her books at a very young age. I mean, as soon as I learned how to read, I was reading her romance novels and I was just hooked. So the name just holds so much respect, admiration. Harlequin is like the king of the romance industry. So it's always just, in my opinion, a privilege to be able to write for such a huge publisher. So it's a place where I think, most romance writers would love to be. I was certainly one of them. So that was always the draw. And I had a friend who connected me with an editor there, and I pitched something for Intrigue, and she presented it to the team, and they ended up liking what I pitched, and we went from there. So I've worked with several other publishers in the past, but once you get to Harlequin, you feel, I did at least, felt like I just made it, So just the name alone is just synonymous with publishing great quality work. So
that's fantastic.
Compliments just be accepted. Yeah.
Rhonda there mentions my mama's books were locked up. So a few people actually said my mama's books were locked up.
My mother made a mistake. She left hers out in the open, and but she's happy. I've never pitched a book that I didn't run by her first.
There you go. Yeah.
She knows her stuff. So I think she's like the romance writing guru, and I always go through hers because she knows it. So I have her to thank for this.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Jacqueline, we have a question there, just asking how many books you actually have written for Harlequin and how you keep coming up with new ideas. There we go. It's right on the screen.
Oh gosh.
How do you keep coming up with all your ideas, Jacqueline?
They just come. I see them like movies in my head. As far as how many books I have for Harlequin, I honestly don't know, but I know is over 30 something. Harlequin was always my dream publisher. Now, I started off, my first book was published with Kensington, the Kamani, Arabesque. I'm sorry, the Arabesque. Arabesque was then sold to BET Books, became Kamani, and Kamani was sold to Harlequin. So I was kind of grandfathered in, which was great because this is where I wanted to be in the first place. Like Denise, I grew up reading my mom's Harlequin books when I ran out of books to read. I would sneak hers, and I had it down to a science where I could read it without bending it, and she didn't know because she had this thing about her books. And so Harlequin actually um, helped me form what the idea of what I wanted in a husband. And so I am married to my very own hero, thanks to
Nice.
Harlequin, for 30 years, because I wanted someone that would look at me and treat me the way those men treated the heroines in those stories. So that's what I wanted to write. But it was intentional to actually write for Harlequin. So I was very glad to finally be able to walk through those doors. And I've already told my editors I'm not leaving. I love it. So that was kind of my Harlequin story. I kind of was grandfathered in, but I'm in.
You are. You definitely are. I don't know if you could see when you mentioned your husband, but there were hearts. People were loving that. So yeah, that certainly strung a chord with the audience. Michelle, obviously, I want to talk about what attracted you to Harlequin, but I also want to segue a little bit into the pitching, because you got your story through a Twitter pitch with Dean Davis at Love Inspired, and I want to talk a little bit about that. Just also because we have some of our Harlequin editors here accepting pitches. So tell me a little bit about that experience and what you can maybe recommend to someone who's going to pitch to Harlequin this weekend.
Okay. So yes, I definitely it started off with a Twitter pitch where Dina was Davis for the Harlequin Love Inspired. We had a little relationship from before because of different events, an event that I attended, and so she put out a call saying, I'd love to see something in the line of Sister Sister. And I'm a huge Sister Sister fan. And so because I was like, oh my goodness, I felt it within me. So I think first I liked it and I commented on the tweet, and then I deleted it. And so we started talking about something else. And then and so then I said, yes, I saw the Twitter page and I really have a concept in my mind that I think would definitely fit with this. I'm a twin myself, not identical. I'm a fraternal, and so I always love stories with twins, and so because of that, that's where it actually started, from the Twitter page where she made that call. And so for anyone that's so following that, one of the things I did was I worked on my concept on the plot line that the characters, of course, building the characters, but then also working on the plot line. And one of the things that Dina has been advising me as I have been proposing different things to her is definitely you want to look at what is suitable for the line that you are pitching. So, for example, in Love Inspired, there are certain things that are certain things that would happen with the characters in other lines that would not happen in Love Inspired. For example, like living together, that would not happen under the line. So it's very important that you get to know the Harlequin have their website, and they do outline all the different areas of what the lines look for. So that's my first idea, is that if you are going to pitch to Harlequin, that you definitely read what they're asking for, because they stay true to what they're asking for. So that was how that started, as far as with the Twitter pitch. And anyone else who's pitching, in particular for Love Inspired, or I also got a book deal with Special Edition. It's really working on the concept of that meet cute. How are the characters going to meet? How are they going to get together? Getting that storyline down packed. I believe practicing your pitches. You want to make sure that you can start off and say what you have to say in about 3 to 5 seconds. Hook them at 3 to 5 seconds. And so you definitely do want to hear, tell me more, or what else is going to happen. That's a great sign. And I don't want to hog the time, so I'm going to stop there and give my other panelists a chance to speak.
That's okay. We could give coaching on pitching this entire session, I'm sure. For those in the comments, Savannah did just drop the website, writeforharlequin.com, but feel free to check that out. As Michelle mentioned, one of the most important things that you can do is understand the different lines and the ones that you're pitching for. I believe our Harlequin editors are from Heartwarming, Intrigue, and then we've got our commercial and trade editors, Park Row and Mira, accepting pitches this weekend. So get to know them before you do pitch. I do want to talk a little bit, Denise, about intrigue and suspense and this whole sort of world. So tell me a little bit, obviously, about the pitching for Harlequin and some advice around that. But I'd like to also just know about why you think that marriage between suspense and romance is so prevalent in the genre as a subgenre.
Well, I think if anyone's planning on pitching to intrigue, one thing would definitely be check out some of the some of the books that they've already published, so you'll get a general idea of the type of stories, like Michelle was saying, the type of stories that they might want, what might be working for them right now, and so your pitch won't be too off from what they normally publish, because they know what works best for them. So maybe stick with that. I think that true crime, to use the word, it is intriguing, but also if you look at networks like Lifetime, Oxygen, those networks are so geared towards women, and you see so much true crime, so many true crime stories happening on those networks. Look at the show Snapped. Most of those storylines they say it's the line between love and hate. So a lot of those storylines involve something, that draws women. So I know for me, I'm a true crime addict. I just love hearing these stories of how relationships might come to an end, or, just what may lead somebody to commit murder. That's just, it's such an interesting topic for me. Then of course I love romance too. So if you have two people coming together, trying to solve these mysteries, and then they just may so happen to have an attraction along the way, I think that's something fantastic to write about. So I really enjoy it. So not only do you kind of have some of that romantic love that goes wrong within those stories, but then you see a new romance brewing within the characters who are trying to work to solve these crimes.
And this is a great opportunity to just segue a little bit. On Twitter, there's all this discourse amongst writers about what makes a romance book and what constitutes romance versus love story. And the big thing is, definitely for Harlequin and definitely for Harlequin, you need to have that happily ever after. So even when it comes to an intrigue story, I see Savannah, a happy ending, full stop. That's exactly it. Not for debate. You can certainly have stories that have love elements, romantic elements, but for the genre and for Harlequin specifically, got to have that happily ever after. Jackie, let's talk about the pitching and even just switching your brain with all of these different lines that you've written for. So, I mean, you've written for heartwarming, intrigue, love-inspired suspense. How do you do it? And how is the pitch different for those different lines? Is it different?
Well, for me, like I said, I'm hyper-focused. Years ago, I was writing young adult women's fiction and romance for 3 different publishers. So I think that it's easier to do 3 different lines within the same house. It was very challenging writing for 3 different publishers because they were not as sensitive to my deadlines for the other publishers as I felt they should be. However, I have a deadline calendar. I'm very, like I say, super organized. So I actually have a calendar that is a deadline calendar. And on there, I know when my books are due, and I give myself a break because I can't write 2 books at the same time. I'm a lot older than, I've been in this business 25 years. I'm not as young as I used to be. So my brain doesn't work that way. I can't really switch it like that. I have to totally focus on one book. Then when that book is done, take at least a couple of weeks to regroup and then start the next book. So I have to factor in all of that. As far as pitching, the suspense, actually, my editor reached out to my agent and said that she didn't know if I would be interested in doing, a love-inspired suspense. They, at that time, were looking for cold case. And she had no idea that I love, like Denise. Denise and I are very similar in that we love all these cold case, things. Me, from a psychological perspective, I have a master's in psychology and with a specialization in forensic psychology. So I love that whole thing. And I've worked, at the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center with FBI, Secret Service, U.S. Marshals, Border Patrol. So I love it. And so when she brought that to my agent, and my agent said, "Are you interested in doing something like this?" I'm like, yes. I never ever thought of just submitting to write suspense. I don't know why. I just never thought about it. But she brought it to me, and to me, that was God ordained. I felt like, okay, God, this is you. Because I've been praying about some things, whether to maybe it was time for me to retire, gone, those kind of things. And then this opportunity opened up. And so it opened up with Love Inspired Suspense. And then from there, Katie and I talked, and I'm like, I really, really love this. And she said, well, there's intrigue, there's romantic suspense. And I'm like, great. So I came up with these ideas, submitted them to her, and got book deals. So now, I'm
The
writing
rest
for.
is history. Yeah.
Nick, can I just add that people might not know this? Jacqueline is one of my closest friends. And
Hey,
so
there we go.
so we've now connected on the suspense thing. So we had a conversation this week that lasted 3 hours. You
Yeah, I
should hear
bet.
the things we're talking about with this whole suspense intrigue, all the television we watched. So yeah.
And Denise, there was a comment Joy actually mentioned about your sense of humor on Instagram, and I do want to talk about your social media presence in a little bit.
Thank you,
But I'm going
Joy.
to go to I'm going to go to Reese first. Reese, one of the things I just wanted to talk about is you are a huge advocate for the romance genre, diversity in fiction. Obviously, something we all care very, very much about. What I'd love to know from you is, in the next few years, what would you like to see more of in the genre? Obviously, beyond what even just you're doing, what Harlequin's doing, what would you like to see more of in the stories that are hitting shelves?
Well, okay, so you just changed up the question at the end, because at the end you
Sure,
said, "What do I
yeah.
want to see more in stories on the shelves?" Okay, but the
Or
thing I
more of
brought
in
up
the genre.
when
Yeah,
you were first when you were first asking the question,
let's
the
go
thing
to the
I
first
want
one.
to see more of is editors, Black editors,
Yeah.
more editors of color. I think that makes a huge difference in terms of what you want to see, want to see on the shelf. First of all, I am so proud of the line that I write for Harlequin Desire. I think it's one of the most diverse imprints that's out there right now, and I am so excited about all the stories by people like J.C. Lee and Adriana Herrera and Robin Covington writes Native Americans. Just such a blend. So I want to continue that's what I want to continue to see. But I want to not only see those books be out there, but getting the marketing support, because I think always we've written these amazing stories. If you go back to all of the Kamani and stuff like that, with the line closed eventually because it didn't sell as well, whatever. But I do think that if you put the marketing money behind books of color, and we've seen that now with lots of books, whether it's Alyssa Cole or Talia Hibbert or whatever, you put the marketing money behind it and they're good books, then they have a wide appeal. So I would love to see more of that and continue to see more books written and published by people of color or authors
Yeah.
of color. So but like I said, I am super proud of Desire. Every time I look at our lineup, I'm just like, I feel like maybe one month me and I can't remember who it was. Maybe me and Yara St. John were both published out of the 6 books that come out every month. And we both have books that month. And I was thinking to myself, that's probably the first time 2 Black people had a book published in a single month, in that line. So I am loving it, loving seeing that. I'm loving seeing other lines like Special Edition and Intrigue and all these other lines and stuff start to be more diverse as well.
Yeah, that's an important distinction to make, and thanks for calling that out. That there's one thing to say, what do we need to see more of in the industry as a whole or in the genre? It's another thing to say, what do we need to see on the shelves? And certainly the work continues. This is actually a great point, Reese. I'm going to stay on you. Actually, could you tell us a little bit about the Bad Boy experience? Reese has a great podcast. Please tell us about it. Rhonda, we are going to do that. Don't you worry. Reese, don't you worry. I discovered her podcast last night. It's on my list. But first, Reese, if you could tell us a little bit about the Bad Boy experience. This is part of the Bourbon Brothers series. And actually, I'm going to go through all of you folks and just I want to hear a little bit more about your books. But yeah, let us know about what to expect from that one.
So
And the Bourbon Brothers series as a whole.
Yeah, so the Bourbon Brothers series as a whole is about the romantic and business adventures of a family, most of whom run a world-renowned distillery owned by a Black family in Tennessee. And so the Bad Boy Experiment is actually the last book in that series. And I felt like so much pressure in my head to like make that last book right, as well as because Cole, who is the hero of that book, was kind of a fan favorite. So I wanted to make that good. So anyway, it's about two people who had mutual crushes on each other in high school. She was his tutor in high school. And she returns to town. She's a single mother now. And they both want the same piece of land owned by her grandfather. And her grandfather has something up his sleeve. So he has a plan for how to decide who is it that deserves this land, which makes them become unwilling next door neighbors who eventually become more.
Nice. I'm sold. Denise, I'd love to also hear a little bit about Cold Case True Crime, as well as the follow-up, just because they were released within the same year, actually. Right. So tell us a little bit about that.
Look, I have my books next to me so I can show off my covers because I love the covers. So Cold Case True Crime is about a blogger whose passion is covering cold cases across the United States, just to try and bring awareness to these cases in hopes of helping these families find justice. Someone Knows Something is the name of her blog. So, but her job hits close to home when one of her friends ends up dead in an alleyway. And after 8 months, the case goes cold. Police feel like he just overdosed on drugs. They kind of blow it off. But as my heroine teams up with the hero, who is a detective who's new in town, she convinces him to work with her because she believes there's more to the case than just a drug overdose. So they start to realize there may be some political corruption involved in this, some undercover police officers doing some dirty work. There's a drug cartel involved. So there's some things there that she's trying to uncover, but then it starts to threaten her life, and he's trying to keep her safe while they get this case solved. So that's Cold Case True Crime. And then this is Bayou Christmas Disappearance. This one came out this past December. And in this one, my heroine is an investigative journalist who travels to the Bayou where she went to college because her best friend has gone missing. So it's a pretty high profile case. There are a lot of suspects, including her husband, people she works with, old friends. And but the detective who's working on the case does not want to be bothered with my heroine because he's a staunch believer in just getting a case solved. He thinks she's going to bring a media circus because she's got a pretty big platform with her broadcast. So they have to work together to see if they can figure out what happened to this woman. And that's like an enemies to maybe lovers type story. So that's Bayou Christmas Disappearance.
Fantastic. And while we're on the topic of a platform,
yes.
I want to talk about the use of social media. You've got around 5,000 followers plus, I think, on Instagram. You've got a growing audience on TikTok. A few of you are there on TikTok. I found you. Let's talk about how that is used today and the benefits you see in promoting your book organically with an audience and reaching your audience.
You know, back in the day, we would get a book and authors were so mysterious. I don't know how other people feel about this, but you'd see that picture on the back of the book. You'd see that short bio and you want to know more. Like, what does this person's house look like? What do they do on the weekend? How did they write this book? You know, so I think social media is a great way for authors to kind of show their process, share with readers when they've got a new release coming out, when they've signed a new deal. I just think it's a great way to connect with fellow authors as well, because I've connected with the writing community through social media and it's been phenomenal. It's a great motivator as well. I know you wanted to talk a little bit about the negative aspects too.
Yeah, I think you probably scared off a few people who have like social anxiety or things like that. So what are the downsides to it, if any?
I think the biggest downside for many writers, aspiring writers, is comparing themselves to other people. And I think that might go across the board with people in general. We get on social media, we see one side of things. We see the side that everyone wants to show. I have so many author friends who have deleted their social media or put it on hold because it's pressure. You know, the other day I was having such a writing block. So what do? I go on Instagram and go read memes, right? But I saw a friend of mine wrote 9,500 words in one day. I hadn't written 100 words, you know, but I don't let that bother me. I let it encourage me. It's a motivating factor. And I think we cannot get discouraged when we see other people moving forward in their careers or any good news they might announce. We have to just look at that as motivation for ourselves and be encouraged rather than, you know, feeling the comparison, feeling down on ourselves because we may not be as far along as where we'd like.
I think that's a beautiful sentiment. If we could all live that way, it would be perfect. Obviously, we have days where we can't, and certainly sort of taking a break from social media when you can't is the best thing to do. Jacqueline, I want to hear about her hometown hero, and then we also had a question that I'll just throw to you. Is how do the suspense authors, and Denise, feel free to chime in, how do the suspense authors research police procedures or anything sort of technical that needs that little bit of research when it comes to like cold cases and things like this? But start a little bit by telling us about her hometown hero, which is a heartwarming book.
Yeah, her hometown hero is a heartwarming, and it is about a man who, a Marine, I'm sorry, who returns home. He's lost both his legs, and he's also lost his whole team. So he's a wounded hero. He doesn't like to be called a hero because he feels like he failed his team, and so he's broken. And it deals with anxiety, PTSD, and just really learning how to live with your new normal. Gia, my heroine, is a physical therapist, and she has known Trey since they were in high school, and that they were kind of like each other's first love. And so she, of course, is not going to let him sit on the sidelines of life. And so this story is, I wrote this story to honor my father, who was a Marine. And it wasn't when he came home from Vietnam. So I'm dating myself. He was in Vietnam. When he came home, you know, it was the invisible scars. It was the ones you did not see that haunted him. And I wanted to really, I'm very active with Wounded Warriors. And so I wanted to write a book that would honor those soldiers because they are the real heroes. And so, Hometown Hero is the second book in my Poke Island series. And Poke Island is a fictional island right across the bridge from Charleston. And, you know, every time I go through Charleston, I'm like looking across the bridge to take me to Poke Island. Poke Island was founded in 1887 by Polk and Haas Rothschild. And those are real names. They're actually real relatives of mine, Polk and Haas. And so I wanted to create an island that was founded by, you know, a Black family, and it wasn't tainted by racial tensions that most of the Black communities faced, you know, during that time. And so I grew up on St. Simon's Island, Brunswick, Georgia, and I loved it there. And so it's kind of based on St. Simon's Island, but I like doing fictional because then I can do it the way I want to do it. But her hometown hero is a favorite of mine. I hope everyone will enjoy it because it is a tribute to veterans, to active duty service members and their families.
That's amazing. Thanks for the background on that. Real quick, Denise and Jacqueline, I'll throw this to both of you because I do want to get to Michelle and Reese as well. And folks, we are in the final bit of this session already. But yeah, let's answer this question, which is how do suspense authors research all this stuff that you need authenticity around? Otherwise, people will call it out when they read the book. Where do you do your research?
Well, like I said, I used to work for the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center, Fleet Tech or FLETC, whichever you want to call it. I just got these new research books, U.S. Marshals, WITSEC, Special Forces. I actually invest and buy research books. My brother-in-law is DEA. So I also talk to, I have friends in FBI, Secret Service, U.S. Marshals, Border Patrol, and the Treasury Department. So I ask questions.
I buy the books that Jackie tells me to buy. So I
And
recently
you talk to each other. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And I tap her for information. And one of the books she had me buy was about forensic science, because I do have a forensic scientist in one of my upcoming books too. But for me, also, all I watch is Investigation Discovery Channel. That's why I'm probably so paranoid, because I'm always over my shoulder. But I love Investigation Discovery. I watch a lot of Oxygen, and I watch a lot of YouTube. There's so much information on YouTube. I tap in there, and then I do a lot of research online. I know Katie Richards is here, and she's another fellow Harlequin intrigue author. She's been commenting, hey, Katie, but Katie is also an attorney too. So we've talked about that as well, doing all of our research and so forth. So, but YouTube, internet, they've all just been a huge help to me. And we discussed how we have to do our research. We can't just put anything together. I don't know anything about lifting fingerprints and investigating these crime scenes. It's very technical. If we get it wrong, the readers will call us out because they know. So the research is really important.
Yeah, Lisa comments, there's a whole series of resource books made for writers that cover everything you need to know from forensics, guns, medicines, poisons. Thanks for putting that up there, Savannah. And it's true. I mean, sometimes we get held back by thinking we have to only write what we know, but do the research, and you can certainly pull off these stories. Michelle, I want to just move to you. We talked a little bit about the adoption surprise through your pitch, but feel free to just expand a little bit about that. And then I want to talk about that writer's retreat in 2011 where you sold your first book, because you do have a very spiritual way of describing how you realized that writing was your calling. So just throwing back to that, if you can just expand a little bit on when that happened.
Okay. So first I'll talk a little bit about the adoption surprise. And the adoption surprise, as I said, featured twins, me and Morgan, and they were separated at birth. And so one was adopted by the heroine's sister, and so they passed. And so now she's Kelsey. She is her guardian, Morgan's guardian. And then the other twin, her father is a widower, and that is Zach, and he has the other twin. And so somehow by divine coincidence they happen to end up in the same small town, and so the twins meet up there for the first time, and that connection is instantaneous. It's real. I got a great inspiration by watching also the first episode of Sister I just loved it to watch that, and so I tried to emulate that with 5-year-olds who met at camp. And so Kelsey and Zach, they agreed to be friends. But of course, as their daughters are getting together, they want to live together. They want to hang out together always permanently. And so they become our little matchmakers. And the only way you're going to know if that works is by reading The Adoption Surprise. And so
what a pitch. What a pitch.
always trying to pitch. So yeah, my first experience was I attended a faith and fiction retreat given by Tiffany Warren. That was my first ever writer retreat, and I had written before then, but like I said, to learn the craft and to meet other authors, learn a lot about different things of what to do with social media. I was not a social media expert, and so you start off going listen to a lot of tips and friends of people who are on, and you learn a lot of tips, and you learn a lot of what not to do as you go on. But when I went to this particular retreat, I learned how to pitch. I learned how to explain my work in a way that someone else would want to read it. And so that's the business side of things that you have to learn how to do. And so again, for me, it was lining up my passion, because I was that person that I would read this book and that book, but then when it came to writing, I felt like I should be able to write whatever I want to write. And so with my spiritual life with God, he had to line me up a little bit and show me, hey, you do not have to compartmentalize your life. You can actually do all. And so I'm glad for the opportunity to also write for a special edition. I have been told, I don't know, okay, it is true that I tend to write a little bit on the hotter side. And so I ventured into special edition to kind of just test the waters a little bit, but I'm being corrected and shaped a little bit so that I can just get a little get my feet warm, get things just a little bit warmer, so to speak. But and I love the fact that Harlequin has that option, that as a writer you can stay within the realm that is most comfortable for you. And I love that Harlequin has that option. So that's a little bit about the adoption surprise. I have the Rivals at Love Creek that's coming in June as well, with special edition, and that involves an SAT scandal and our heroine, who's at the forefront, Black principal, an educator by trade, and so I'm bringing some of my education into my stories, and I was glad for that opportunity. So that's also coming out under Michelle Lindell Rice in June. Thank you.
That's fantastic, Michelle. Reese, I listen, it was brought up. We got to talk about it. Let's talk about your podcast on YouTube, The Story Behind the Story. What I want to know with that is, it's a fantastic way to promote your work, but also a really great way to meet authors. And I'm just wondering, have you found that talking with authors like that has strengthened your craft at all?
Definitely is strengthened my craft. I mean, just like this is a perfect example. I have been sitting on a series, a suspense series that I've been wanting to write for years, and like they're into true crime. I hate true crime, but I love mysteries. My husband and I, that's all we watch is especially British and Canadian mysteries. We watch them all the time. And so I'm actually like sitting on a series I've been trying to write for Witsex. So I'm like writing down the books and stuff that Jackie's holding up. So I learned so much. But what I love about the podcast that I do is that it's reader centered. So, it's very interactive. So the readers get to ask questions, be involved, make comments and stuff. And it's just like two friends sitting down, having a conversation, and the readers get to come along for the ride. So I learn a lot in those conversations. Hopefully the readers learn a lot, and the readers seem to enjoy being able to be a part of a conversation like that. But I absolutely love it. I learn something every time. And I've got a chance to talk to so many amazing authors, like some of the OGs that they mentioned, like Miss Bev and Miss Brenda and, Donna Hill and stuff. So it's just been an amazing, amazing ride. So I'm enjoying it.
That's fantastic. And yeah, so our Wanda says Reese's smile is so contagious, just in case you didn't see that.
Thank you.
So if you want to see more of Reese's smile, you can do that by going to YouTube and I found it actually just by typing your name. So if you type that, it'll come up, but it's The Story Behind the Story is the actual name of the podcast. And I encourage you to do that. Folks, I could talk to these four women for literally another hour easily, probably, and then some. But unfortunately, we are out of time. So one thing I do want to say is that, yes, as I mentioned before, we do have Harlequin editors here accepting pitches. I do believe you can still sign up for them until tomorrow afternoon, Friday at noon. Tomorrow is Friday. We have editors from Park Row, Mira, those are our trade and commercial imprints, as well as Harlequin Intrigue and Harlequin Heartwarming. Make sure you research the lines beforehand. And then there's lots more coming from Black Ink Charleston. Tonight, we've got In Conversation with Monique Patterson. Tomorrow, we've got the evolution of the Black female character in fiction and romance. And I got a little preview of that yesterday during a test run, and you don't want to miss it. It's great. Savannah's just telling me too, here at Harlequin, we've got some free books that we're offering. So if you've never read a Harlequin book, as part of being here at Black Ink Charleston, you can check that out. They are at the Black Ink info booth. So you got to navigate your way to that. And that's how you can access a handful of free books to test the waters if you've never done that before. And then last but not least, I do want to say, sign up for Write for Harlequin if you haven't done so already. If you enjoyed these stories, we feature stories like these every single month in our monthly newsletter, and you can still catch January's newsletter. I haven't sent it out yet. But also at Write for Harlequin, we have advice, tips from editors, everything you need to know to write for this publisher. Thank you very much, Jacqueline, Michelle, Reese, Denise. This was fantastic. Like I said, I could talk to you forever. Thank you for joining me. Enjoy the rest of the festival, everybody. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.